Hey guys, Jack Cypher here, back with another One Piece video. What's that? 2 in 2 days? We're on a roll, let's keep it going. Today, we're going to be talking about the Gorosei, the 5 Elder Stars, the 5 geezers down in Pangaea Castle, the 5 mysterious old dudes that it's taken us over 1,000 chapters, 1,000 episodes to find out anything about. Oda has been teasing us with these 5 dudes since I believe it was an episode 151 they were introduced in the anime. I'm a little bit shaky on what chapter that was, but I believe it was 150 or 151 that they got introduced in the anime. But with today's video, we're going to be going over everything we know about the Gorosei, individually and as a group of what they represent. We're going to be going into some of their powers and abilities because, spoiler alert, we've found out a lot of information about them in this last arc of One Piece. And speaking of that, if you guys aren't up to the current chapters of One Piece, that the most recent one is chapter 1120, then there will be spoilers up until that point. So if you want to go catch them on the chapters before coming to this video, go do that now and then come back. We'll also let you know, just like I did in our previous chapter review, these videos are now entirely non-scripted. So if you hear me talking over myself, hear me going on excessive tangents, which I imagine we will be, that's why. Anyway, let's begin with this video properly. Let's go into what or who the Gorosei are. When we first get introduced to them, it's 5 old dudes who run the world government. The world government that's in charge of the Marines and Cypher Pole, as well as the 7 warlords. And the Gorosei are in charge of all of them. So they're essentially in charge of 2 of the 3 great powers in this world that Oda has created. For the longest time, we thought that they were the pinnacle of hierarchy in the One Piece world until, the last few years when we found out even these guys have a boss. We're not going to get into Im Summer much in this video. We'll touch on him a little bit when we get to what happens in the Reverie arc. But for just this video right now, we're just going to be going into the 5 Elder Stars. So, the 5 Elder Stars are the highest ranking celestial dragons. I know they don't look like the traditional celestial dragons that we get introduced to, people like Charlos and everything. It's actually quite interesting going into the psychology of it, if you want, of the fact that the Gorosei don't walk around in all the protective suits and air bubbles that the lower ranking celestial dragon members have, or wear, sorry. The Gorosei even seem, while the people like your Charlos and all the riffraff celestial dragons are completely deplorable, treating everyone like bugs and insects and that only exist for their pleasure. The Gorosei, while they think like that on a base, on like a top level, like to them we're all kind of just insects, they do show respect and they do show some, dare I say, humility in, at least when they talk on the surface. That's what I'm trying to get at. They don't truly think that, like, no one's their equals. The only one they answer to is Im Summer, obviously. But on the surface, they can present the air of, they're quite gentlemanly type characters. They're not brutish or roguish or anything of the sort. They're respectful, if not patronizing. They seem to respect things like strength. For instance, we do later on, or get into it in the video, they have a meeting with red-haired Shanks, and they seem to be more than willing to indulge Shanks' requests to speak to them. Whether or not that has something to do with Shanks' parentage, we don't know yet. Since we don't know that, I am going to just go off to the safe assumption that he's an emperor. The Gorosei can respect the efforts and strengths that it takes for an individual to reach that kind of height of power. Now, being celestial dragons, and being the rulers of the world, essentially, we don't see them much. They have, in this area of the video, I'm going to go over 5 or 6 instances where they appear. Like I said in the beginning of the video, the first was around episode 150, and that is when Shanks and Whitebeard are going to be... The Gorosei get a report from the Marines that Shanks has sent a message or word to Whitebeard because they wanted to meet up. And the Gorosei have a visible kind of shaken reaction to this. They're nervous about what this could mean, because obviously, in their minds at least, I'm thinking that they're worried about a potential alignment between these two powerhouses. Because out of the emperors that we've seen, Whitebeard and Shanks are the most level-headed, rational of the lot of them. And I could definitely see the Gorosei being worried about those two teaming up. They also do have a past relationship with Roger. I mean, a past shared relationship through Roger. It's ironic that in this headcanon line of thinking, the Gorosei are worried about those two teaming up when it was actually the two most unstable members of the Emperors that did team up. But anyway, in episode 150, 151, they're worried about that. They also bring up Crocodile, and their disappointment in him failing and being defeated, because that's disrupted the power of balance. Like I said in the beginning, we have 3 powers of balance in the One Piece world. We have the Marines, we have the 7 Warlords, and we have the 4 Emperors, or the Yonko. And to have one of those members be... Well, when I say members, with the Marines, it's essentially the 3 Admirals. So 3 Admirals, 4 Yonko, 7 Warlords. We've got 14, really strong characters. And of course they all vary in strength, but with the loss of one of them, the Gorosei are concerned that that balance of power has been impeached. And the Gorosei, and we'll get into this a little bit later, all have individual areas that they govern over. But overall, their main concern is to keep up that balance of power. They want to keep the world continuing how it is. It's definitely narratively implied that they've done a lot of shady stuff to get it to how the world currently is. So they're wanting to do anything in their power not to have that disrupted. And, fittingly enough, that's when we first get introduced to them, when the risk of that has become a potential of happening. The time that we get introduced to them after Alabasta, essentially, is in Dressrosa. Now, before we get into what happens there, they have a really interesting conversation with Sakazuki. I do want to preference that there's some certain instances that happen before the story of One Piece, namely God Valley and Ohara. I will be getting into them, but I'm going to be doing them at the end of this little bit here. I want to get the current day versions of them out first. I'm also skipping over some of their some of the appearances they have where they don't say much. They fuss over the will of D and the state of the world type of thing, just to let the audience know that they're still there. But we have them in Dressrosa, and they mainly appear at the end of it. They have been blackmailed by Doflamingo, bold move from him, into, tricking the entire world that he had stepped down from his position of warlord. And Fleet Admiral Sakazuki, formerly the Admiral Akainu, he's not too happy with it. He confronts them in Marijois in Panjiro Castle, where they reside, and speaks about how them doing this kind of makes a fool out of him and therefore the Marines. Now, the Gorosei don't really care about that. They kind of talk down to Sakazuki, blaming him for Kuzon's departure from the Marines. And basically that the Marines are just the world government, aka the Gorosei's public image. The Marines can afford to have some bad press on them as opposed to the bad press being on the Gorosei and the world government, the celestial dragons. So but like Sakazuki, they're not happy with the turn of events that are happening. Doflamingo is biting the hand that feeds him and is rebelling and causing chaos. Is there any better character in One Piece to cause chaos compared to Doflamingo? I mean, the man should freaking align with Peter Baelish from bloody Game of Thrones, because they'd be climbing that ladder together. Now, in this Dressrosa scene, we also have, just from my memory here, Fujitora and him doing a really badass thing and expressing to the entire world that what's happened in Dressrosa and that it was their failings, as in the Marines' failings. So everything that the Gorosei has tried to do to keep up public image kind of just gets washed down the toilet by Fujitora's actions. Because, Fujitora is obviously a very morally just person. He's quite possibly one of the most morally just characters in the entire series, and we'll do a separate video on him later. But we don't get the full in-depth reaction to the news of that, but they do not look best pleased with what's happened there. After Dressrosa, they make an appearance at the Reverie. Now this is where we get some mind-boggling revelations of the state of affairs in One Piece, stuff we just had never known about before. So the Reverie is a meeting where not all, 50 kings around the One Piece world come together and convene, discuss world politics and that matter. And Nefertari Cobra, King of Alabasta, comes along like he does in presumably all the past meetings, and he wants to speak to the Gorosei. It's quite a ballsy move from what we understand. Even if you're a king, you don't just request that, and it certainly doesn't get granted. But the Gorosei have always considered the Nefertari family as, utmost supreme traders, because the Nefertari family were one of the 20 families that became the world nobles. They were essentially a celestial dragon family, but they decided to remain in the lower tier world. They didn't want anything to do with them. And one of Cobra's ancestors, I'll put her name up on the screen, I'm completely blanking on it, essentially the Vivi of that timeline from what we know so far, was in charge of the Nefertari family at that point in time, and she completely disappeared from all records. Even in the records in Alabasta, they have no mention of her. And Cobra goes to confront the Gorosei about it. He wants to know, what's up, what happened to her. I believe it's Topman Walkery that tells him, either or, it doesn't matter. They all speak in one voice essentially, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well. But they tell Cobra that they played dumb. They we have no idea what happened to her. She just disappeared, type of thing. Playing it down a lot. Obviously, from a narrative implication, we know that she's going to have a big impact. You don't bring a character like that up not to pay it off. I know there's a lot of theories that she could be Imsama. I'm not going to speculate on that at the moment, but it'll be very interesting when we do find out what happened to her, or if you run with that theory, what has happened to her in the past 900 years. Anyway, Gorosei play dumb, refuse Cobra's request, and Cobra he doesn't back down that easily. He's come here for answers. It's also important to note that Cobra is sick and dying at this time, so he kind of has very much YOLO energy on the whole matter and wants to find this information out for the betterment of his family and the world. And he asks the Gorosei point blank, what does the will of D mean? And the Gorosei are pretty shocked probably by the ballsiness of just coming out and saying it. I imagine in their line of work they deal with a lot of, more politician type answers, beating around the bush type of thing. The fact that he's just come out and said it has probably shocked them. And before they can really answer him on that, there's has been listening in. He comes in. There's a massive clash between Sabo and the Gorosei. I should mention that because I just completely forgot there. Before Sabo comes in and blasts them all with a fire fist to the face, the thing that does interrupt the Gorosei from presumably telling Koba to, get the hell out of our throne room is that Summer walks in, he sees the empty throne, he looks at it, or they look at it, I should say, because we don't know if it's a man or a woman, and they sit down on it. And this is Cobra's shocked out of his mind. He can't believe this. The world government's, is supposed to run on diplomacy, essentially. There's supposed to be 5 rulers, and they're supposed to, allegedly, take stock and value in what the other leaders of the One Piece world think as well. We know that it's not that. The Gorosei don't give a shit what the kings of the One Piece world think. And Summer very much doesn't really care what the Gorosei would think. He's the one true king. Everything goes through him. If he doesn't like something, if he wants to wipe a whole country off the map, he'll do that. He's the king. He's the god. You all bow down to him, or they. And Cobra's seeing this, like I said, he's just... I'm surprised, given his fragility at the moment due to his sickness, he didn't just have a heart attack and die. But, like we said, Sabo intervenes, fire fist to the face. We get monstrous silhouettes of what the Gorosei could be. We'll get into that more in the video. And they try to escape. During the escape, the Gorosei are able to kill Cobra. Which is very unfortunate. Cobra, for all intents and purposes, was a great character and very enjoyable in the Alabaster arc. But he dies. That's going to be sad for VV to hear. VV ends up getting captured, but we won't go into that. And Sabo escapes. The Gorosei cut off all transponder snails communications, so Sabo can't relay what he's learnt to the Revolutionary Army. And Summer decides to wipe out, I believe it's the Kingdom of Luitia. I could have pronounced that wrong. Probably pronounced some more stuff wrong going in. If I have, forgive me. But they use I believe it was the Mother Flame to power what we presume is Uranus, the ancient weapon. At least, that's what we're thinking going forward, to completely obliterate the island. It is no longer there. No one talks about it. Just like the Void Century, they've erased it. And that pretty much, that revelation there in Reverie about the true king of everything is probably the biggest revelation we've ever had in One Piece not even up until that point, just all the way up until chapter 1120, current chapter One Piece. I don't think there's ever been a bigger revelation. Things like Luffy and Ace's parentage was definitely up there. The bounties for people like Gold Roger and Whitebeard were definitely up there. Hell, even the introduction of the Gorosei way back when, 20 real life years ago, would have been up there. But I definitely think what happened at Reverie there definitely takes the cake. Now, let's quickly go over what happens with the Gorosei at Wano, and then we'll go and get into the juicy, terrifying bits that happened before the start of the story. So in Wano, they don't play a huge role in it at all. They're keeping up to date because they've got Cypherpole Zero there, so they're keeping tabs on everything that's happening. They start shitting their pants when they believe that Luffy is close to awakening the Gamo Gamo no Mi, or what this entire time we've led to believe is the Gamo Gamo no Mi. We were just talking about revelations. Luffy's devil fruit not being what we thought it was, is that bigger than the revelation of Eam Summer? I want you guys to tell me about that in the comments. Which one you think was actually bigger? Because that completely slipped my mind just 2 minutes prior, but that is definitely up there. So they're worried about it because they know the real name of that fruit is the sun god Nika fruit. And that it's, in their words, and I quote, the most ridiculous power in the world. And they're going to do anything in their power to prevent it from being awakened. Now, they said it hasn't been awakened in centuries. I like to think that this was Joy Boy's fruit. Like, that's a very common theory. That's not mind-blowing. I'm not, enlightening you all. There's some debate on whether or not it was Joy Boy who last awakened it. Some people have speculated that this might have been someone else. I like to think that there wasn't, that it went Joy Boy and then it went Luffy. Not that other people couldn't have eaten the fruit in that period of time. I reckon they obviously did, but they weren't able to awaken it. I like to think it was just Gorosei. That would be truly awful. It was Joy Boy and Luffy that awakened it. Now, the Gorosei get their Cypherpole Zero agent. I actually can't remember his name. The one with the white mask that had the unfortunate task of getting in between Kaido and Luffy's battle. Literally the poor sod that had to go and interfere with Godzilla and Kong. And it goes as well as can be expected. He interferes in the fight. It causes Kaido to defeat Luffy. Kaido, in kind of a despair of having his victory tarnished like that, completely destroys the Cypherpole agent that I've forgotten his name of, and pretty much pounds him into paste. The Gorosei, I believe it was, it could be wrong, I think it was Marcus Mars, one of them deemed Cypherpole agents very valuable. It wasn't just like, oh, throw away that bit of trash. We don't need that thing anymore. They did seem to value the strength and resources that a Cypherpole Zero agent does have, and they were willing to risk that in order to prevent, or willing to sacrifice that, I should say, in order to prevent Luffy from awakening it. And it completely turns on their head for them. I can't think of a more fitting or suited expression / saying other than your destiny is often found on the path you take to avoid it. And by God, did the Gorosei find their destiny. Because their plan completely backfired. Luffy not only didn't die, he awakened the very power they were so desperately hoping he wouldn't. He goes God mode, he takes on Kaido, he beats Kaido, and all of the Gorosei's worst fears become realized. The Gorosei must be shitting their pants that essentially Joy Boy, the person that they very well were fighting 900 years ago to create the world that they have, their biggest thorn in their side, has now just come back and he's gonna whoop their ass. But other than, that ends Wano. That brings us into the Egghead arc, and we're gonna get into that last because that's where we finally get introduced to all their powers and what they're capable of. But that ends everything up until then. I'll briefly go over quickly before the main storyline. In Ohara, they made an appearance, and by God, did they make an appearance! They massacred all of the scholars that were researching into the Void history. They didn't just kill the scholars; they killed everyone on Ohara other than Robin, because there was a risk. This wasn't the Gorosei, but the Gorosei would have truly thought what Akainu was doing there by blowing up the evacuation ship was, the right thing to do. They couldn't run the risks of anyone getting out, and they murdered them all essentially. But once again, with Clover, he was just in our previous One Piece video in the review. When the Gorosei, I believe it's Marcus, that was talking to Clover over the Denden Mushi, he's not like, you pathetic insect, you are trash, you will die now. He's kind of very polite to him over the Denden Mushi and kind of seems a little bit regretful. I don't know if that's too presumptuous of me to say, but I could imagine them respecting the efforts that Clover would have had to have gone to gather the information that he did. Because the reason that they kill him, they're having a good old conversation with him before this. The reason that they kill him immediately is because he's going to reveal the name of an ancient kingdom. And we know now it's the ancient kingdom that he was going to reveal the name of. And the Gorosei couldn't have that, and they shot him. But with this is what I said about the spoilers for this video, all the way up until the most recent chapter. We just found out that Clover was Climb D Clover. So that spins a whole new light on that scene. It's the gods versus their challengers, essentially, the Will of D. And Clover got killed. I'm trying to think if Clover died with a smile on his face. I imagine he would have. I'll have to go back and have a look at that scene, and I'll include some pictures and stuff like that. It'd be very interesting if he didn't. It'd be a bit of an oversight, but I definitely reckon he would have died with content, not content, because his contentness would have been telling the world of all the information, that the history that Clover believed they rightfully deserved to know. But he would have been, I don't know if proud's the right word either, but had a sense of accomplishment that he had found out he had really hit the Gorosei where it hurt. He found out information that they couldn't let getting out, and he died with the knowledge that not only has he kind of, stuck it to them a little bit, but he's died with the knowledge that there are people that's going to continue on his work, namely Robin. So I imagine he would have died with a smile, but I will fact check that. The time before that is not the Gorosei that we see them. I can't speak today. It's not the Gorosei as a whole that we see. It is one of the members. It is, what's his name? Saint J. Garcia. J. Garcia Saturn. The main one we see at Egghead, to be honest. The Gorosei member we've seen the most of. He goes to God Valley, an island we probably have all heard of, very infamous. It's an island that no longer exists, that was completely wiped off the map by the forces of the Roger Pirates, the Roxy Zebek Pirates. The world nobles were there having their little freaking Hunger Games hunt. The goddamn Gorosei was there, like we said, St. J. Garcia. And there were... I'm not going to get too much into these guys here, because frankly we don't know enough about them. But there were the God Knights there as well. Essentially the strongest warriors in the Celestial Nobles other than the Gorosei. We don't know exactly how strong they are. There's a lot of theories that the leader of them is Shanks' father. And just by, narrative, that would make him pretty goddamn strong. But we don't know just how powerful they are. They're obviously stronger than common riffraff. But we don't know if, the Roger Pirates were able to just stomp them, if it was a, back and forth struggle. We don't know. So I'm not going to reference them that much. Consider it like this, though. Eam Summer, Gorosei, God's Knights, low tier riffraff of the Celestial Dragons, and then you have the kings and the princesses and princes and shit like that, the nobles. And the Marines would be up there as well, people like your fleet admirals and stuff, that at least Sengoku very much implies to know the will of D. He probably knows a lot of the Void history as well. Um, I imagine that's just something that the fleet admiral kind of gets told. Otherwise, Sengoku's been going behind some people's backs and finding out that information. But in the God Valley incident, before shit hits the fan, Saturn has a interaction with Bartholomew Kuma, former warlord, and his wife to be, who ends up being Bonnie's mother, who Saint J. Garcia ends up capturing and enslaving, not at God Valley, later on in the future, but basically ruins Kuma's life and Bonnie's life. He's a real dick. As are all the Gorosei. This video isn't me trying to, justify their actions when I kind of compliment them on being better people than your Charles's and stuff like that. They're still dog shit. They're just lesser dog shits than those characters. But that's pretty much all of the scenes that we see the Gorosei in, other than in Egghead. And with everything that happens in Egghead, I'm not going to be spending a huge portion of this video going into what the Gorosei do there, because it's very simple. They're there to kill Vegapunk. Vegapunk's been researching the Void Century. They can't have that. They're there to silence him. Now, there are people like Luffy there. If they can kill Luffy while they're at it, they're going to do it. Two birds with one stone type of thing. So, before we do get into going into all their... Because, we're going to be using the Egghead chunk of this video to go into all their powers and abilities. Because, as much as we love One Piece and the world that Oda has created here, it is still a battle shonen manga, and we all just love to see what these bad boys' abilities are that people have been waiting over 1,000 chapters to see. Do you guys remember back in the day where people used to speculate that the Gorosei weren't even combatants? We didn't know what, if they had powers, what they were. To be honest with you, we still don't even know everything we should know about their powers, but we have a big enough chunk of it that I really want to go into it. But really quickly, before we touch on their powers, we're going to go over who all 5 members are and what domain they reside over, essentially, because they all have an individual aspect of the government that they control. Those saints are Saint J. Garcia, Saturn. That one really trips me up a lot. He's the warrior god. That's all Gorosei have the title of warrior god, and he's the warrior god of science and defense. So that's the domain that he has rule over. There is Saint Ethan Baron V. Nazjuro. Not sure if I pronounced that last name right. For the rest of the video, we're just going to be calling him Ethan Baron, or good old Ethan. He's the warrior god of finance. We have Saint Shepherd Jew Peter. He is the warrior god of agriculture. We have Saint Marcus Mars, the warrior god of the environment. We have Saint Topman Walkery, the warrior god of justice. Honestly, it was a bloody struggle to remember all of them, because for the longest time, it was the Gandhi old dude, the Garnfol brother, the Sanji's uncle, the Scarhead, and... who was the other one? The old dude with the hat on. We didn't know who the Gorosei, we didn't even know what their names were. So it's still an adjustment to me to remember when I'm looking at them that, hey, that's not Sanji's uncle. At least we don't know that yet. But most likely that's not Sanji's uncle. It's Jew Peter. And spoiler alert, he's a sandworm. A freaking sandworm. But the Gorosei each, like we said, each hold dominion over one of those aspects. Just really quickly, because I reckon it's a really interesting theory. I didn't pick up on it myself. I don't know who was the originator of it, so I can't give any shout outs or credit to, but I really wanted to bring it up. There's lots of speculation that what the Gorosei rule over is the polar opposite of what their powers are. We're gonna get into it, but essentially, a good example is we know. Oh, I spoiled you for it. That Jupiter is he can turn into a sandworm. Now, Jupiter holds the dominion of agriculture, farming essentially, the world's food supply. And a sandworm lives in the desert, a very barren place where crops do not grow. Kind of get where I'm going with this? They're kind of the polar opposites. What they rule over are the polar opposites of what their powers tend to suggest. Kind of like that they're death and destroyers that are masquerading as benevolent, creative gods type of thing. And rather than going it all over now, because it's going to spoil what the powers are, we'll do it for each Gorosei member. And let's start off with Saint Shepherd Jupiter and his sandworm ability. I say ability to transform into it because technically we don't really know what these. We assume that it's a devil fruit. We assume that it's a mythical Zoan fruit because all the Gorosei have yokai transformations. But to be honest, we don't actually know. I know Vegapunk does say that it's some sort of devil fruit ability, but we don't know what type of devil fruit ability it is because the Gorosei have a lot of nebulous powers that don't kind of correlate to even things like mythical Zoan fruits. So for right now, just for simplicity, I guess, I'm going to refer to them just as Zoan fruits, unknown Zoan fruits. But when I'm saying that, essentially think of mythical Zoan fruits. So we have Saint Jupiter, who can turn into a giant sandworm. I know a lot of people reckon it's a little bit underwhelming compared to the others, that he's kind of like the least cool member of the five of them, which is kind of funny, because for the longest time, as Sanji's uncle, he was kind of considered the younger, cooler one of them all. But he's the one that kind of got the short end of the stick. I don't necessarily agree with that. I reckon that I do have some that I like more than others, but they're all kind of the same for me. As in his sandworm state, he can use a suction power with his mouth to suck in all different kinds of matter and destroy it. He can also spit that stuff back up, but given the type of power levels we're dealing with here, he could probably use this power to suck up like an entire island's worth of debris and rubble and houses and stuff like that. Think of what Fujitora did in Dressrosa with the gravity, taking everything up into the air. I imagine Jupiter could probably do that by sucking it all in. He can also transverse under the ground, and his teeth are strong enough to bite through the Iron Giant, which is a pretty good feat, because the Iron Giant does something to Top Man Walkery later that even Luffy couldn't do. Now that only suggests a level of offensive power, it doesn't necessarily go to his defense, but if we're taking some narrative liberties with it, we would imagine that it'd be very similar. So the fact that Saint Jupiter is able to bite through this is very impressive. Now, started with Saint Jupiter. When I thought about doing this video, I wasn't going to start with him, so let's backtrack to where I was originally going to start with, and we're going to start with the man, the myth, the legend, the Gorosei that gets the most screen time, Saint J. Garcia Saturn. The reason I want to start with him is because some of his powers, we don't know if all of the Gorosei can do it or if it's just him. So when he gets to Egghead, he teleports there. Magical circle and everything. And later on, he summons the other four Gorosei from Pangaea Castle to Egghead. Now, we don't know if this teleporting ability is exclusive to Saturn, that he needs to be the one that does it, or if all the Gorosei can do it. The reason I say that is because there are two other abilities that all the Gorosei have, that don't really fall in line with other devil fruit abilities. And the teleporting ability can kind of go in with this, we're just not sure. Those abilities are telepathy. They can all communicate with each other. It doesn't seem to be affected by distance, but they all can telepathically talk to each other. The other is immortality. They're all like, I don't want to say 100% immortal because there's obviously going to be some way to stop them, but you know what? It's probably good that I brought up Saint Jupiter as well, because he was straight decapitated, and he was able to regenerate from that fairly easily as well. Saturn took a lot of different types of damage and was able to regenerate from that as well. It doesn't really matter how you damage them, they just kind of regrow and regenerate. Luffy even tells everyone, like, we can't fight these guys because, like, Luffy can push them back and stop them or beat them, but he's not going to be able to truly stop them because of this immortality. So, because the Gorosei did all teleport to Egghead, we don't know if that is with the telepathy and the immortality, or if that is just um, Saturn's ability there, like exclusively to him. That would kind of make sense. I kind of like the idea that it's just Saturn's ability. It makes his Devil Fruit seem more unique to itself. But it also makes sense of why he's the one that gets sent out. Because if push comes to shove, he can summon his other four geezers to help him out. So my headcanon thinking is that it is just Saturn's ability, but we could be completely wrong. I could be completely wrong there. It could be just a Gorosei's ability as well. But Saturn's ability, his Devil Fruit ability, is to transform into a giant spider ox that's referred to as a Gyuki. Um, it's pretty much what I said. It's a spider with kind of like an ox head. It's got the horns and everything like that. It can cover its limbs in poison to stab through people with its 8 legs, and it can spit out venom bombs that cause massive explosions and stuff like that. Very deadly stuff. He also has. Now, I'm assuming. This actually leads credence to my theory that the teleportation ability is just Saturn's, but he has other abilities that really don't correlate to the Gyuki spider monster poison type abilities. Because he can use, let's call it telekinesis, to force people down and restrain them without like having to touch them or anything. And he can even use it to blow up people's heads. Legit, just completely one hit KOs them type of thing. And he does it without any arm gestures or anything. He can just restrain them and has this telekinetic power. With this telekinetic power and the teleportation, it makes it seem like his Gyuki fruit kind of has some form of, you know, magic to it, especially because the teleportation was literally magic circles. It wasn't like, you know, snapped his fingers and they appeared. It looked very esoteric, and this was another esoteric ability. So I'm kind of inclined to believe that the teleportation and the telekinesis, we're just going to refer to it as telekinesis until we know more, is exclusive to Saturn. But you guys let me know down in the comments how you think his power works, or if it's all of the Gorosei's power. I'll also mention that all 5 of them in their yokai forms are gigantic, easily the size of a giant. But let's keep this ball rolling and let's go to good old Ethan. Gandhi, basically. His form is the one that people think is the coolest. And it's easy to see why. He's a giant skeleton dead horse yokai that's known as a Bakatsu, I believe. I'll put the name on that if I'm wrong, but I believe it's a Bakatsu. And in his hybrid form, he's a skeleton centaur, so even cooler. He also, in this form, it's not just a giant skeleton horse, he has the power to control ice. He uses that power alongside his swordsmanship, which we'll get into in a little bit, to completely blitz and take out all of the pacifista on Egghead. You know, one of these pacifista back in the day were essentially taking out the entire Straw Hat crew, and he's just wiping out hordes of them effortlessly, just to show the power development we've had in One Piece. Now, his swordsmanship doesn't stop there, because he's strong enough and capable enough to launch an air slash attack that completely cut through the labo phase of layer of Egghead effortlessly. Now, we've been seeing characters do similar feats like that since Punk Hazard and Law cut through the mountain, but still, it's an incredibly impressive feat. Probably more impressive, now it's just a theory. It's one of those, like, there are so many different theories in One Piece that some are realistic, some are just way out there. But this theory, I actually reckon, I'd be more shocked if it didn't happen. But that the sword that Gandhi has, the good old Ethan has, is the Saijo Owazamono Shodai Kitetsu. The blade that's ranked up there with Mihawk's Yoru and Whitebeard's Naginata, and recently Fujitori's sword that he carries, the katana that he carries. Oda recently came out in an SBS and proclaimed that. And so if you guys didn't know that, there's that for you. I will be doing a video on Fujitora, and we can go into his blade a little bit more there. But it is very much speculated that he wields the Shodai Kitetsu, the most cursed blade of the Kitetsu line, and that's pretty badass in my opinion. Now, the Gorosei we should go into next. I reckon it's up there with Ethan's Bokotsu fruit as kind of being really up there. I love the design of it. It is St. Marcus Mars Itsumade Devil Fruit that turns Itsumade's Devil Fruit. What am I talking about? It's Marcus Mars Zoan fruit that transforms him into an Itsumade, which is basically a giant reptilian snake bird type of thing. Put a picture of it up on the screen. I'll have pictures for all of these transformations because I won't be able to do them justice describing them all to you. Now, good old Marcus Mars, good old Gandalf's brother, Gonfal's brother. He kind of looks like Gandalf though as well. Sorry, that was a very silly slip there, but in his Itsumade form, you know, he's a bird. We've shown him and he's giant. We've seen him be able to fly up into the sky, destroy a bunch of shit with his size. The main kind of mythological part of this Zoan fruit is the fact that he can shoot off Kamehamehas out of his mouth and do a ton of damage. We haven't seen his powers so far seem to be more basic. But I do reckon we'll see more of it. I reckon his fruit will have more aspects than just shooting off laser beams and flying. And the last Gorosei member we have is Saint Topman Walkery and the Feng Shi Devil Fruit, Zoan Devil Fruit. I believe it's a Chinese. I don't believe. I know it's a Chinese mythological boar that has 4 tusks. What I don't know is if I'm pronouncing it right. If I'm not, let me know down in the comments. Now, this one you might say is more basic than good old Gandalf's Devil Fruit, but it is on the surface. But if you look into it more, it's actually pretty crazy. It's also quite a useful, good old Top Man's quite useful for if we want to go the anime power scaling route of a lot of these characters, because Luffy red rocks him, and keep in mind that's the red rock move that hurt Kaido, that got through his basically impenetrable armor up until that point, and it doesn't do anything to Walkery. Not only does it not do anything to him, it actually hurts Luffy. It's a bit of a flashback there to Ichigo trying to cut down Kenpachi and hurting himself. Not only does Luffy's red rock not work on him, but later on he makes a giant fist in Gear 5th and tries to attack Top Man then, and it still doesn't work and injures Luffy again. That's an insane level of durability. It's also worth noting, I don't know if it's just something that Oda forgot to draw or if he did it on purpose to convey this to his audience, but Luffy's ability to turn everything into rubber and Toon Force type stuff in Gear 5th didn't do anything to Top Man. He just punches him and gets hurt and recoils from that. Now, is that all just from like the tough hide of this Feng Shi devil fruit? Or is this just the insane amounts of level of haki that Top Man possesses? Because one other ability that he possesses in his Feng Shi form is giant haki howl like shockwave things. Basically, in his form, he like roars. Why did I say howl? He's not a fucking wolf. He's a goddamn boar. He roars a conqueror's haki shockwave at people. So it's one of it's like it's showing that he has like powerful haki being able to do this roar thing. So is the defense durability from the haki side of things? Is it just from his devil fruit, or is it a mixture of both? Which would probably be the most likely outcome there. But the reason why this is such a good feat for like power scaling and stuff like that is because Luffy wasn't able to harm him, which we can speak more on about how it could hurt Kaido but not Top Man in a different video. But the Iron Giant was able to actually hurt Top Man Walkery in his Feng Shi form. One minor other ability that he has, he can turn his tusks into blades, and the Iron Giant was able to destroy one of those tusks. So that kind of puts the Iron Giant's offense higher than Luffy's. The reason why I'm not going into the comparisons with Kaido here is because while this video is getting very long and it's already susceptible to many tangents, it's bordering on that topic is just going to be way too long, and I'm going to get way too distracted with it all. But to finish off going over all the Gorosei's abilities, we're going to go over their haki very briefly. And I didn't plan it this way, but finishing it all off on Walkery was probably the best bet, because through him we see Conqueror's haki, which Marcus Mars and Jay Garcia Saturn possess as well. They were using it to knock unconscious the Den Mushis. I reckon it would be completely not likely that Ethan and Gandhi... What am I talking about? It's the same bloody dude. That's up there with the Gandalf comparison. Ethan and good old Peter would most likely possess Conquerors as well. Each member of the Gorosei as well has shown different versions of haki, armament haki, and observation haki. If Vice Admirals have both of them, all the Gorosei are going to have both of them. It's probably going to be at a very high level. But like I said, if we've got 3 out of the 5 of them displaying Conqueror's haki, it's a pretty safe bet to say that all 5 of them will possess Conqueror's haki. And I promise this will be the last bit of the video, and I'm trying to stay away from too much power scaling, because it's very contentious, especially in One Piece. But just very briefly with it all, we have the Top Man and Kaido comparisons. Saturn was able to immobilize a character's power, like he did it to more people, but the strongest character he did to was Sanji, and Sanji wasn't able to move. Sanji is a Yonko commander tier level character, and Saturn's able to restrain someone like that. He's out there, Gorosei able to fight on par with Luffy. Now, does that make them Emperor levels? I reckon narratively it does, for more reasons than just that. But this is where I didn't want to touch on it much. Just because Luffy beat Kaido does not mean he's stronger than Kaido. Kaido in Wano had gone through fight after fight after a fight. He wasn't at like they both characters weren't at like full max HP clashing it out. I like to think that Luffy is still relative to Kaido, that they're still like if they have 10 fights, that Luffy might win 5 of them and Kaido might win 5 of them. So I, I don't reckon that the Gorosei are necessarily stronger or weaker than the Emperors. Because Luffy was able to kind of push back a couple of them, a couple of the Gorosei, but it's their immortality that made, landing any decisive hits difficult on them. So I reckon most of the Emperors could kind of push them back, and it would be the Gorosei's immortality that really came in handy to potentially beat them if the Gorosei are able to, like one Gorosei is able to beat one Emperor. If they can do that, I reckon it's pretty safe to say that the main reason that they would be able to is through their immortality. And we're going to wrap the video up on discussing their immortality. Because for the longest time, we speculated whether or not, like before we knew their Devil Fruit about powers and their longevity and stuff like that, that whether or not they were immortal, whether or not they were from the Void Century. But we see in the flashback at God Valley with Saturn that he looks the exact same then as he does now, and off the top of my head, I believe that was 38 years ago. So I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that they are all much older than they look. Whether or not they're just very slow at aging, or whether or not they're truly like timeless, we don't know. It doesn't really matter if they're slow at aging; they're living over 1,000 years, type of thing. The one, it's not a theory, but one speculation that some fans have: did all 5 of these guys join at the same time, presumably in the Void Century, or is it something that happened over time? Every 150 years type of thing. Me personally, like there's no real proper arguments that you can give for either point. I believe that they were all from the Void Century. I believe that they were all probably heads of one of the 20 families way back when, and I reckon they decided to join Eam Summer, and it was because is it the devil fruits that they possess which grant this immortality, or is it something that Eam has bestowed onto them? We don't know. For right now, I'm not even going to speculate either or, because there's just no real evidence for either matter. Like right now, it's all up to your own headcanon about it. If you had a gun to my head and I had to pick, I reckon it's something about the actual devil fruit. I reckon that it's not a mythological Zoan devil fruit. I don't know if we're going to have like a Zonko, a Yonkai category of Zoan devil fruits, or if these are going to be like, demon fruits or whatever they're going to be. But I reckon this kind of tier of devil fruit is what's granting them their immortality. I don't think it's something that Eam's bestowing upon them. That's very kind of like true, like godhood level abilities to be able to grant immortality, and I don't reckon that would be the case. But anyway, that's pretty much everything that you need to know about who the Gorosei, what the Gorosei are, who they are, how they're able to rule the world, what their powers are. I want you all to let me know down in the comments, what do we all think about the powers, and specifically the immortality? Is it granted from the devil fruits? Is it something from Eam? But let me know down in the comments. Let's get some conversation started with it all. But for right now, I've been Jack Cypher. We've just deciphered everything you need to know about the Gorosei. Peace out.